Hi, welcome back to CU Live. I'm Lauren Sega, Associate Editor with Columbus Underground, here with Dkéama Alexis, wearer of all hats in community organizing, co-founder of Black Queer Intersectional Collective, co-creator of Columbus Community Pride, now prevention specialist with Equitas Health. Welcome, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me, Lauren.
Yeah, so they just finished up Columbus Community Pride year number 2. How'd that go?
It went really well. We were very excited with how all of the events turned out this year.
Yeah.
And we just finished up with the Community Pride Festival, which happened last Saturday. And, despite the forecast and the rainy weather, we were still able to be out there all day. We're so grateful to all the performers who came out, all the vendors and organizations, and also like our volunteers and organizers and also ASL interpreters. So it was definitely another community-based project, and to see how people came together to make this one possible was really gratifying, especially because we suffered a lot of losses this year. So to have a space where we can come together as a community and really like uplift joy and togetherness while also challenging these systems of oppression, it was really important to have that space.
Yeah, a lot on the agenda. Healing, celebration. So yeah, Dkéama's here to talk about all things Pride, everything affecting the LGBTQIA+ community, because even though the Pride celebration's over, it's still Pride Month, guys.
Yeah.
You don't need to give up the hype.
Exactly.
What I thought was really cool about Community Pride was that you got Cece McDonald in Columbus to share her story, to speak on a panel about issues affecting LGBTQ people of color.
Yeah, for sure. We regrettably weren't able to bring her all the way out. She Skyped in for the documentary
bring her in?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it was really awesome that we were able to do that. I was connected to Cece through Amitha Swadin, who is a really amazing queer femme of color who does a lot of work, uplifting stories of people who have survived child sexual abuse, and she herself, or they themselves, are a survivor. So they are connected to Cece through a lot of the work that they have collectively done, and sort of being connected as like trans people of color. So after I did an event at OSU talking about survivorship and Black trans resilience on a panel with Amitha, they made that connection to Cece. And it was really important that we continue to uplift Black trans women in our Community Pride celebrations. We did that last year with the Miss Major screening and having her come out to Community Pride. So we wanted to continue to uplift that this celebration with Community Pride. So we had Cece come, or digitally come in to talk about her story and her perspective on Pride. But then we also had a panel of predominantly Black trans women who live here in Columbus and can speak to their own experiences here locally. And the reason why we wanted to do that is because Black trans women are they face the most amount of violence in the community. There have been 5 or 6 murders of Black trans women in Pride Month alone. So, as the stakes are getting raised higher for Black trans women, we really have to continue to show up for them, putting money in their pockets, giving them the space and the resources they need to either just live peacefully in this world that's so hostile to them, or, also enable them and empower them to create spaces for themselves, kind of like what the Marsha P. Johnson Institute is doing. Al Hearns is doing incredible work to create space for Black trans people, but particularly Black trans women. So, we all have an investment, and we all should be invested in uplifting Black trans women. And that is really what we wanted to do with Community Pride, and continue to do, outside of Pride Month, because Black trans people exist outside of just June. And we face a lot of things outside of June. So that's what we want to continue celebrating and centering.
Of course. Those of you unfamiliar with Cece McDonald's story, she's a bi-trans African-American woman who in 2012 was targeted with her friends by a group of individuals who attacked them, basically. She fought back, ended up killing a man. In that defense, she served 19 months?
19 months.
Out of
she ended
41 months sentence?
Yeah, she ended up taking a plea deal that was reduced to what they were trying to charge her with originally. I'm not sure what the exact amount of time was, but it was an exorbitant amount of time, which kind of speaks to how the criminal justice system is inherently racist and transphobic and seeks to uphold the daily violence that Black trans women face on the streets. And that was seen with CeCe McDonald's case.
She spent 19 months in a men's prison
as
well.
Yeah, she had to spend time in a facility where she was subjected to, harassment, regular humiliation and abuse. And her story is, one of many stories like this. There are Black trans women who are often, when incarcerated, put in men's prisons and face a lot of these similar conditions. And, thinking about how the state murders Black trans women, even if not like directly, police officer or somebody who represents the state, killing somebody by their own hand. We have to look at Layleen Polanco, who is a Black trans woman incarcerated at Rikers, recently found dead inside of her cell. So, Black trans women are under attack in a myriad of ways.
Right. And,
CeCe's case definitely helped highlight that, and her story of survivorship certainly helped highlight that.
And it took an international coalition to even get her out before her 41-month sentence was up. So it just shows the need for that support from the greater community.
Right. Like within BQIC, we definitely champion solidarity as a main way that we can all get free. And when I was watching her movie the first time, I kind of drew those connections of it was an international solidarity movement. She had people in Europe sort of calling for her freedom. And that really reminded me of Angela Davis's incarceration and how it took a global movement to get her free. So then to see them, talking later on in the documentary, it was just okay, here are these links, past and present. Here's this Black radical tradition. And here's that tradition being upheld and supported by solidarity, because it will take people from various backgrounds, collaborating towards the liberation of the most marginalized to actually get us free.
So like I said, that was back in 2012. I think since then, though, we've been seeing, this isn't a good thing, but maybe it is a good thing that we're hearing about it, more and more names. Malaysia Booker, Chanel Lindsay. It's not great that we're hearing these names every month, but the fact that we are aware, right? There's a raised awareness of this violence that Black trans women are facing.
There's definitely a raised awareness, which, I think a lot of the community, even though it's good to have eyes on these cases, it's kind of still disheartening to know that not enough is being done to interrupt that violence, especially by communities at large. These deaths still often go unaddressed. There aren't, big rallies or marches for Black trans women. And, every year that we hear these names, those of us in the community who are either Black trans women or in close relationship with Black trans women understand that there are so many names that we might not ever know. There are so many names who have been, misidentified, so many people who have been dead named after their deaths and have been reported on incompletely or incorrectly. So even though there is visibility around the plight that Black trans women face, hypervisibility is also what's killing them.
Right.
So I think a lot of people are tired of, these awareness and visibility kind of being where people stop. We have to go further than just that. Hearing these names and reading them off isn't going to, interrupt the violence.
Others.
Yeah, it's not going to protect people. So again, it's kind of what are people doing in their daily lives to empower Black trans women around them, to rail against these systems that disenfranchise and disempower Black trans women. What does it look like for everyone to have an investment in that? And we don't see that quite yet. And I'm looking towards the future and towards a world where Black trans women and trans women of color are seen, secure, free, and completely affirmed. And it will just take a widespread buy-in for that from people from all communities.
It's probably a multi-layered question that I'm about to ask, but what do you see as a solution to to Black trans women no longer having this target on their backs from members of the greater community?
Right, yeah, that is a multi-layered question. It's because,
Good luck.
Yeah. Well, oppression works at multiple axes, like interpersonal, ideological, institutional. So, it would require both revolutionary change at the interpersonal, where people take the time and the energy to learn about the ways that they have, been oppressive towards Black trans women or upheld trans misogynoir, which is the hatred or fear of Black trans women. And doing that work day in and day out to disabuse yourself of preconceived notions, but also doing the daily work of showing up for Black trans women and making sure that they are safe, whether that's offering rides or meals or what have you. But then, at institutional and even an ideological level, what does it look like for, people and organizations to change their hiring practices and remove certain credentials that will immediately bar Black trans women? What does it look for, organizations to have practices and policies in place that actually affirm and make space for all marginalized people, but especially in this case, Black trans women? But thinking even bigger than that, it is going to take revolutionary change and, dare I say, a revolution to create a society in which marginalized people from all backgrounds, but especially Black trans folks, can be free. I see capitalism and white supremacy and classism, all of these different isms and systems. They exist to perpetuate the policing and dehumanization of people who don't fit the status quo and people who don't fit that, that normative identity. Mm-hmm. And it's going to take work to, dismantle these structures, dismantle the other structures that uphold them, like policing and prisons, to create conditions where Black trans folks are free. And, definitely that's a lofty goal, but at the same time, as an abolitionist, when I think of freedom and when I think of liberation, I think that, it's not going to do us any harm to imagine this world, this free world that has, no policing, no cages, no systems of oppression that target particular communities. And, it certainly is going to hurt us more living under current conditions where these things persist and exist. So what does it look like for us to do the hard work of, challenging these systems and showing up to remove their power and reduce their scope, but then also doing the hard work within our own communities to replace those systems? Because we're told that policing and prisons help us address harm and help us reduce crime, but what if we figured out ways to address and repair harm within our communities without the intervention of the state?
Right, punitive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Instead of punitive, let's think about transformative change within our own communities, but that transformative change societally overall. Mm-hmm.
It's tough too, because even as societal views of these issues change, we're still stuck within a political system where we have leaders who decide what policies, go into place and what don't. So we, as a community, I think that we're starting to talk about these things a lot more often, especially issues that you're describing. We're starting to talk about preferred pronouns. We're starting to talk about insurance coverage for gender-affirming surgeries. These are things that we're all slowly becoming more comfortable with, but we still see from the larger government, right, these rollbacks of rights. So how do you think we transform public opinion into public policy?
That's a very good question. I would say that I'm still, learning a lot about public policy. Mm-hmm. I'm still a fairly new organizer, have a few years under my belt. But I think I've just, because of, how entrenched those power structures are within this very rigid government, especially now we have a tyrannical leader who is the president of our country. I've just lost a lot of faith in the electoral system, and especially don't see the electoral system being a way for us to fully secure our rights and for us to fully get free. Because at the end of the day, you know, on either party, you have a bunch of wealthy elites who are trying to protect their own interest and protect their own bottom line, which leaves out the majority of the US population who can only ever dream of making that much money and like having that much access within their lives. So, you know, I am honestly calling for like complete like revolution in the United States, where, you know, all of these resources that are being hoarded by the wealthy elites that run our country are rediverted in a way that, you know, helps benefit everyone, where everyone has access to the life-giving resources that they need. What would a revolution look like here in the United States? I, of course, have no idea. And, you know, I'm not positive or sure of like how public opinion can like get us to that point. But that's kind of where I'm like looking, is like, how do we get to a society where people can govern themselves? And I understand that public policy can be like a step towards that, you know, whether people like get public policy passed to, for example, like reduce the scope of their like local jails or like their state prisons. Mm-hmm. And within that work, being able to shift public consciousness around, we don't really need to, you know, our prison's obsolete, our jail's obsolete. Are these structures that we've invested in really serving us in the ways that we can, or in the ways that they say that they should? Mm-hmm. So I'm just kind of like more vested in, you know, putting my focus and energy into like the abolitionist work and seeing ways that that can be done like grassroots, and hoping that like a lot of that grassroots change can like shift public consciousness into, you know, hopefully just, you know, tipping the scales and, you know, creating a tipping point where we can imagine a radically different society, and not just a society that has, you know, the same structures and rigid power in place.
Now, if only we could get to a point where everybody has that.
Yeah, I know.
It's the first step, right?
Right, exactly. It's a lot of, I guess, like public consciousness raising, a lot of like education. And
with the creation of Community Pride, have you seen those conversations happening more broadly in the community among people who maybe weren't typically having those conversations before?
Yeah, for sure. You know, I think like because we're so staunch about, say, like we're not going to have police present or any other arms of the state, because in order to truly honor our radical legacy, we have to reject those forces. I think a lot of people are beginning to interrogate their knowledge of, you know, LGBTQ history, or, you know, challenging their knowledge of, well, why don't they want police? Like, what is it about like policing, if we haven't ever questioned it before, what is it about policing that makes queer and trans folks of color unsafe? So I think like, because, you know, Community Pride is becoming more of like a household name, so to speak, people are certainly like, you know, looking more into, you know, the inherently racist structure of policing, and are looking into this history of the Stonewall Rebellion, but also like the organizing and uprisings that happened before 1969, for example, with the Compton Cafeteria riot. So, you know, I think at the same time that this, you know, public consciousness is happening, you know, we see mainstream prides like still somewhat becoming more entrenched. For example, you know, Stonewall had like an even higher police presence this year and an even higher attendance this year. So it just kind of seems as though, you know, things are not necessarily like separating, but
in flux.
Yeah, in flux. And it's kind of hard to gauge like how much of that education is actually spreading when we see like such a boost in numbers of both policing but also people at a mainstream Pride event. But, you know, we also understand at the same time that LGBTQIA plus people have very few spaces where they can go to feel free. And especially like, you know, like younger folks in the community who are just sort of like trying to strike out and find their own community. But we're hoping, you know, that over time that people can be critical of either the systems that they're entrenched in or, you know, the initiatives that they choose to support. And BQIC and Community Pride, like all we can ever hope to do is just inform people of that and, you know, encourage people to instead support initiatives that are Black trans led instead of ones that are dangerous for Black trans people.
For sure. So moving forward away from Community Pride, what plans does BQIC have going forward?
Thank you for that question. So moving forward, we really just want to continue base building and building up our membership of Black LGBTQIA plus people because, you know, we see organizing as a way to get the goods. It's really important that, you know, we try to build a formidable force against the, you know, oppression that so many of us are facing here in Columbus. And Columbus is, you know, such an oppressive like environment to live in with, you know, like the police force and the mayor and like all of these different things that are just like, just so, yeah, so entrenched. So we are just looking to bring in more members, actually, you know, like educate ourselves on like issues that directly affect us. I'm kind of interested in, you know, doing like study groups and reading groups on like theory as it relates to like Black liberation and Black radical tradition. So that we can also like in communities that aren't necessarily organized now, like once we organize them, people have like a basis from which they're doing the work. And it's really important to spread that knowledge and raise that consciousness. But we're also looking to, you know, try to get ourselves a space to organize out of, as well as continuing to do our work of like Free Resource Fridays, where we give out free resources to folks in predominantly Black areas, as well as, you know, our spoken words and other spaces where folks can like share their art and their talent and just, you know, be their authentic selves. And, you know, as for like what our organizing work or campaigns might look like, I know we're definitely going to be trying to work again with the Coalition to Free Masonique and advocating for her while she's behind bars, serving out the rest of her sentence. That's really what we're just trying to do. And I'm also excited for when the Marsha P. Johnson Institute like finally starts to work here. I know Elle has some great ideas for the work that she's trying to do in Columbus. So in whatever way that we can like collaborate with them, that's what I'm interested in for BQIC. So yeah.
Awesome. So for anybody watching here who might want to get involved with BQIC, what's the best way to do that?
Great. Yeah. So you can sign up for our listserv at bqic.net. You can also reach out to us at blackqueercolumbus@gmail.com. And you can also follow us on Facebook at BQIC, BQIC. So we'll be sharing information about like upcoming meetings. Our general meetings are for Black people who identify as Black and LGBTQIA plus only, but we're also going to be, you know, as the year goes on, like scheduling out quarterly meetings for the whole public to come and get involved. Or, you know, at least get updated on the work that we're doing so that people can figure out how they can support us while, you know, not necessarily being a member. And yeah, we're also going to be trying to build up our accomplices listserv for people who don't identify as Black and or LGBTQIA plus, so that if they can't show up to general meetings, they can at least, you know, take action from afar, because we don't believe in allies at BQIC, because allies, you know, often pay lip service to the movement and to people in the movement without doing anything about conditions. We want people who are accomplices with us in our fight for liberation, who actually stand in solidarity with us and will put their money where their mouth is, or, you know, otherwise take action to better the conditions of Black, trans, and queer folks. So yeah, that's where we're moving.
All right, start writing your checks.
Yes, please.
All right, thank you so much. This has been Dkéama Alexis with BQIC and Columbus Community Pride. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.